Hey everyone, Stickfigure Historian here, and this is the very first episode of the Scotland series. We're going to start off by looking at a map of the British Isles. In modern times, the countries that compose these isles are actually called the United Kingdom. That includes England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Only the rest of Ireland stands alone from the Union. That's a long story for another day. But did you know that this was not always so? There was a time that all of those countries were independent, separate people ruled by their own governments. Our story today takes us back to medieval times, to the time of knights and chivalry, of kings and war. Scotland stood a nation free of foreign control, ruled by its own king and laws. England, its greater southern neighbor, had invaded it before and wreaked havoc along its borders. And sure, so had Scotland on England's side of the line. But no matter what the fighting, at the end, the crumbling ruins of the Roman Emperor Hadrian's wall still stretch between the two countries and their different peoples. And truly, they were different peoples. The English had a pedigree consisting of the old Germanic Anglo- and Saxon tribes, proud Normans, and even a smattering here and there of the brave and ancient Britons, who had held their part of the Isle at the first. The Scots, on the other hand, were a mixture of a mysterious tribe known as the Picts, fair Norsemen, fierce Celtic tribes come over from Ireland, and only a spot of the Anglo-Saxon blood. Now, in medieval times, Hadrian's Wall was not the exact political boundary of England and Scotland. It was actually contained entirely within England by a few miles. But it was close enough, and still served as a very physical reminder of the separation between the two nations. But in the year of 1286, that was all to change. It all began with a horse, a king, and a cliffside. Alexander III was the king of Scotland in those long ago days. A very lonely king he was. For 10 years he had lived a widower, for his queen, Eleanor of Provence, had passed away. And as if this were not sad enough, the 3 children which she had borne him also died in the very flower of their age. So that now Alexander was altogether alone. But this year of 1286 was a year of great rejoicing for the king, for at long last he had found himself another queen. Yolande, a fair noble's daughter of France. Great celebrations were held all over Scotland in honor of the royal marriage. On this particular evening, the king was in attendance of a great feast being held within the beautiful fastness of Edinburgh Castle. Yolande herself was not present at the feast, but was awaiting his return in Kinghorn. Tomorrow was her birthday, you see, and Alexander had promised to come to her that day. The eating and drinking went late into the evening, so that the sun had set when the king at last arose from the table. He had drunk perhaps more than was good for him, and his servants and companions began to be worried about the trip home. And rain was coming down upon the castle roof in torrents. Another ill omen to their homegoing. But the horses were saddled nonetheless, and off the royal party rode into the rainy night. The journey was not a pleasant one, with mud splashing up from the horses' hooves, and each hour bringing blacker darkness as the night wore on. It was nearing midnight when King Alexander came to a bridge that crossed the river Forth. The mark that their ride was but halfway through. The king's followers felt it was madness to carry on. They begged him to stop and spend the rest of the night somewhere, reasoning with him that he could still reach Kinghorn later in the morning. But the king was generally stubborn, and the great quantities of wine had not helped his disposition at all. He refused to wait, but rode boldly across the bridge. He had promised the queen he would be there, and he was determined to accomplish his purpose. So bold was the king, in fact, that he rode well ahead, so that in time he was out of sight. Some of his men began to worry. What if something were to happen to him on the road? Who would protect him? But others didn't care. Let him ride fast if he wanted to. There was no need that they should press themselves or their horses to such limits. It only spattered up more mud. The sun was rising when Alexander's followers rode up to the castle at Kinghorn. Yolande came out to meet them in high spirits, expecting to see her husband. But Alexander was not among them. "Where is the king?" she asked. The men were shocked. "He pressed ahead of us," they said, "and surely we thought to find him here with you." A frantic search was begun then, all men scouting the roads for any sign of the missing king. At long last they found him, and a terrible sight it was to see. In the dark and rain, his head swimming with too much wine, Alexander had steered his horse off a cliffside road very near to the castle. Both horse and king had toppled over the treacherous edge, and neither had survived the fall. So, you see, Scotland went from rejoicing to mourning in only a day. For not only had their king perished, but there was not even a prince to take up the crown anew. Little did the nobles and people of that nation know the greatness of the struggle that now lay before them, all because of the untimely death of a king. So, I just wanted to put a little ad on at the end here for those among my viewers who aren't familiar with the wall I was talking about. So, Hadrian's Wall was built by the Roman Emperor Hadrian, beginning in 122 AD. That was in the days that Rome occupied Britain, and the wall was primarily a mode of defense and a way to regulate trade. Rome never really got a very good handle on the northern part of the island, and there was often trouble with the tribes there coming to attack them, so the wall was a way to keep that at bay. Plus, as I said, any trade between the two sides had to go through one of the gatehouses, so Rome could get a cut on any of the profits there. There's actually a common myth that Hadrian's Wall was as far north as the Romans ever managed to push, but that's actually not true. The Emperor Antoninus Pious had another wall built up further north, only 20 years later actually, in 142. It wasn't anywhere near as impressive as Hadrian's. It was only earthworks, built up on a stone foundation. But it was there. Like Hadrian's Wall, it was largely built for military control of the restless tribes there. Anyhow, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for episode 2.